Welcome back to Reform Thinking. We're diving deep again today, looking closely at some foundational texts.
That's right. Today we are opening Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. This is the section on creation, day 4.
The sun, moon, and stars. Seems straightforward, maybe.
Well, you might think so. On the surface, it looks like just a report about God making the lights. But when you dig into it, especially with reform sources, you find it's incredibly dense theologically. Really crucial stuff here.
I can see that. It does feel simple at first, but then you think, we live our whole lives by the clock, by the calendar these things govern.
We do, and yet there's still that pull, isn't there? Even today, people glance up at the stars and wonder about meaning or destiny. Maybe they laugh about horoscopes, but the impulse is still there sometimes.
That's the tension, yeah, that feeling the cosmos should mean something more than just telling time.
And Genesis 1.1:19 speaks directly into that tension. It gives a powerful correction. So our mission today in this deep dive is to get a really clear, detailed grasp of what day 4 signifies.
Okay, what's the core correction then?
Genesis insists these lights are not masters. They're not other gods. They're not just random bits of physics either. They are God's appointed servants.
Servants, installed for a purpose.
Exactly. Installed for specific, defined jobs. And those jobs dictate how we should order our time, our worship, even our life together down here on Earth. It cuts against ancient pagan ideas and modern secular ones, too.
So it's about putting the lights in their proper place, theologically speaking.
Absolutely. This whole passage is a brilliant display of, well, what we call teleology creation, having a purpose and providence, God actively sustaining and guiding it all.
And that fits right into our confessional understanding, doesn't it? Thinking of the Westminster Confession.
Straight into chapter 4 of creation. The confession isn't just about God making things exist, but about Him ordering and equipping everything. Day 4, it's a prime example of that ordering. It's theology, not astrophysics, being taught here.
All right, let's start with the structure of the whole creation week, because where day 4 lands in that sequence is important, isn't it? It's not just dropped in randomly.
No, not at all. It has a very precise place.
Yeah.
You know, the basic pattern. Days 1, 2, and 3 set up the major realms, the domains.
Right. Day 1 is light and darkness, the time realm, you could say. Day 2 separates waters, creates the sky, the expanse, the space realm.
And day 3 brings out the dry land and plants the life realm, or the stage for life.
So day 4, it then comes in and sort of furnishes or fills one of those realms.
Yes, it furnishes the realm from day 1. It provides the specific tools, the instruments to manage that light-dark distinction God already made.
Okay, so it fills the day 1 realm.
It does. But there's another connection. Look at verse 17. God set the lights in the expanse of the heavens. That expanse, the rakia, was made on day 2.
So it's related to day 2 as well. They're placed within that structure.
Correct. They aren't just floating out there. They're installed in the sky dome created on day 2. So you see this interlocking design. God makes a distinction by His word alone on day 1. Then He furnishes and maintains that distinction using created instruments on day 4, placing them within the structure He made on day 2.
It's a coherent system He's building.
Perfectly coherent. It shows God distinguishes first, then He appoints, means to uphold that distinction. The whole week is systematic.
That systematic approach itself teaches us something about God's wisdom. Okay, let's drill down into the specific words used. The Hebrew verbs here are doing a lot of theological work, especially compared to, say, pagan creation myths.
They really are. Let's look at the verb for making the lights in verse 16. Asha, that's aleph shin he.
Resh aleph, and that means made. But there's another word for create used earlier in Genesis 1, right? Bara.
Yes, bara, bet, resh aleph. That's the word used in verse 1. In the beginning, God created bara, the heavens and the earth. It's also used for creating the great sea creatures and humanity, the image bearers.
So why use Asha here for the sun and moon instead of Bara? What's the theological significance of that switch?
It's a huge distinction. Bara points to God's unique power to bring things into existence out of nothing, or to make something fundamentally new, like life or the divine image. Asha, on the other hand, usually means to make, fashion, accomplish, or even appoint, often working with existing materials or setting something up for a function.
So using Asha for the sun and moon suggests God is, what? Fashioning them for a role, appointing them.
Exactly. He's not creating the raw stuff of light here. He already separated light and dark on day 1. Here, He's fashioning specific instruments, the greater light and lesser light, to administer that light. Asha emphasizes their function, their appointment, their role within the existing creation. It defines them as manufactured tools, not primal sources.
That lines up with how Esha is used elsewhere in Genesis, like for God forming Adam's body later or making the land animals. It's about shaping and preparing things for their purpose.
Precisely. It signals divine craftsmanship, arranging and equipping. And this idea of purpose is hammered home by the next key verb in verse 17, natan.
Natan, nuntav nun, that means set or placed here, but it can also mean give, right?
It can. And using natan here powerfully underlines God's sovereign, intentional placement of these lights. It argues against any idea that they just sort of happened or evolved impersonally. No, God placed them. He set them deliberately in the expanse.
Their existence and location are purposeful acts, gifts almost.
Yes, gifts with a purpose. And that word natan, it does carry echoes of covenant. Think about Genesis 9 after the flood. God says, I have set, natan, my bow in the cloud.
Same verb.
The very same verb. Placing the rainbow as a covenant sign and placing the sun and moon to govern time. It connects the regularity of the cosmos directly to God's faithfulness, his covenant promises. The predictable orbits aren't just physics. They're a display of God's reliable fatherly care. It's providence made visible.
Okay, so we have asha, fashioning, appointing, and nathan, setting, placing. There's one more key verb that links day 4 back to day 1, badal.
Badal, betdale lamed, meaning to separate. Verse 18 says the lights were appointed lahabdil, to separate the light from the darkness.
And that's the same function God performed directly back on day 1.
Exactly. This explicitly confirms their role. They are administrators, ministers carrying out the separation God already decreed. They don't create the distinction, they maintain it. They are cosmic civil servants upholding the established order. They have no authority apart from that task.
So the structure, the sequence, and these 3 specific verbs, asha, natan, badal, they all work together. They paint a picture of a cosmos intentionally ordered by God, governed by his reliable providence, and administered through appointed creaturely means.
That's the theological foundation laid right there.
And on that foundation, Genesis builds this really strong argument against idolatry, doesn't it? Specifically against worshiping the sun, moon, and stars, which was so common back then.
Absolutely. This structural theology we just talked about, it sets the stage perfectly for the direct polemic, the argument embedded in the choice of words used on day 4.
This is where Moses uses that deflationary diction you mentioned. He avoids the common names for the sun and moon.
He does. The normal Hebrew words would be shemesh for sun and yerich for moon. But Moses pointedly avoids them here.
Why? What was wrong with those names?
In the surrounding cultures, those weren't just names. They were the names of powerful gods. Think of Shamash, the great sun god in Mesopotamia, or Yerich, or Sin, the moon god. These were major deities people worshipped and feared.
So by not using those names, Moses is doing something theologically significant.
He's performing a textual takedown. Instead of Shemesh and Yarich, God calls them what?
The greater light and the lesser light.
Exactly. Reduced from gods to objects. Defined only by their relative size and their job ruling the day or ruling the night. It strips away all the divine aura. They're demoted from sovereigns to servants, from deities to devices. It's a radical theological statement made simply by avoiding certain words.
And what about the stars? They get mentioned too.
Barely. It's almost like a little aside, and the stars. Verse 16, just tacked on.
So that diminishes their status too.
Completely. It lumps them in as part of the same creation package, also made by God, also subordinate. It prevents anyone from thinking, okay, maybe the sun and moon aren't gods, but what about the stars? Maybe they form a divine council. Nope. They're just also creatures.
So the language and the structure combine to say, do not worship these things. They aren't gods. They're tools made for your benefit on earth.
Precisely. Theology rides on the diction. The text itself forbids astral piety. The heavens declare God's glory, not their own divinity.
Now these lights are appointed to rule, mashal, the day and the night. Let's look at that verb, mashal, memshin lamed. What kind of rule is this?
It signifies a very specific kind of rule. Limited creaturely governance. It's a functional oversight, a delegated administration. Their jurisdiction is strictly defined by God's command and purpose. Rule the day, rule the night, marks the times.
It's not absolute rule then.
Not at all. It's a completely different from God's own absolute sovereignty. It's a bounded authority.
How does this mashal, this rule of the lights, compare to the rule or dominion given to humans later in Genesis 1? Is it the same kind of authority?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. The verb often used for human dominion in Genesis 1.26 is radah. Breshele, that's a stronger word, implying subduing, governing, having charge over, reflecting humanity's unique role as God's image bearers.
So Rada for humans is different from Mashal for the lights.
Yes. Mashal for the lights is non-moral, purely functional. They manage the schedule, the clockwork of the day-night cycle. Rhoda for humans involves moral responsibility, stewardship, active governance over the living creatures. It shows a hierarchy. God rules supremely. Humans rule as vice-regents over the earth, and the lights rule functionally over the divisions of time. Different layers of delegated authority.
The lights administer time, humans administer the earth under God.
That's a good way to put it. The lights ensure predictability. Humans exercise stewardship.
Okay, so day 4 powerfully refutes ancient idolatry, but you also said it challenges modern naturalism, the idea that the universe is just impersonal stuff following laws with no overall purpose.
Yes, it cuts against that just as strongly. The whole emphasis on telos purpose completely undermines a purely naturalistic view.
How so?
Because the text doesn't just say God made lights, it immediately tells us why he made them. For signs, for seasons, for days and years, and to give light upon the earth. If the universe were just random matter and energy, there'd be no why, no stated purpose. The sun would just be...
But Genesis insists it was made for something. For us, down here.
Exactly. The constant refrain to give light upon the earth, to rule the day, to rule the night. It directs our gaze downward, to the sphere of human life and vocation. It tells us the cosmos isn't indifferent. It's structured and purposed by a personal creator for the inhabitants of the earth. The heavens exist for humanity, not the other way around. That's profoundly anti-naturalistic.
Let's get into that specific purpose, the telos, laid out in verse 14. It gives 4 functions. For signs, and for appointed times, and for days and years. That's the mandate.
This is the absolute core of day 4's function. And notice the order. It goes from the general to the specific, and significantly, it includes sacred time right alongside civil time.
Okay, let's take them one by one. First, for signs, aleph vav tav. What kind of signs are these?
These are signs of God's covenant faithfulness and his reliable providential ordering of the world. They display his stability, his consistency.
So, not signs in the sense of astrology or fortune-telling.
Definitely not. We have to be crystal clear here. Scripture explicitly warns against looking to the signs of the heavens for predicting your fate or guiding your life. Jeremiah 10.2 is unambiguous about that. That's what the pagan nations did.
So, what do these signs signify?
They signify God's dependable governance. The sun rises every day. The seasons follow in order. These are visible tokens, reminders that God is faithful to the order he established. They function like the rainbow in Genesis 9, a constant, visible pledge of God's commitment to his creation. They preach his reliability.
Okay, signs of providence, not divination. Got it. What's next? For appointed times, mo'adim. Memvalvayan dali yodmim. This sounds important.
It is. Mo'adim is a hugely significant word. It means appointed times or fixed times. But it quickly becomes the technical term throughout the Old Testament for Israel's religious festivals, their sacred assemblies.
You mean like the feasts, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles?
Exactly. Leviticus 23 lays out the calendar of the Lord's feasts, and it repeatedly calls them the mo'adim. So right here in creation, God is embedding the foundation for the rhythm of worship.
Wow. So the structure for Israel's worship calendar is built into the very design of the solar system on day 4.
That's the assertion. And think about the timing. This purpose, mo'adim, is stated before God even creates the animals or humans on days 5 and 6.
What does that imply?
It implies that the pattern of worship, the sacred rhythm, isn't just some later human invention or merely a response to sin. It's part of the original fabric of creation itself. God designed the cosmos with worship baked in. Psalm 104.19 actually says God appointed the moon for the mo'adim. The moon cycles were the divinely given clock for Israel's feasts.
Worship is woven into the structure of reality from the start. That's a big claim.
It is. It makes communal worship a creational ordinance, not just a good idea.
Okay, after signs and appointed times, we have the last 2. For days and years. These seem more straightforward.
They are the ordinary civil markers of time that structure everyday life. The rotation of the earth gives us days. The orbit around the sun gives us years. This provides the regular cadence needed for agriculture, for society, for planning.
And this regularity, it's not just practical, is it? It's theological, too.
Very much so. This predictable rhythm is a pastoral gift. It points to the stability of God's ongoing providence. After the flood, God promised Noah that seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, would not cease. Genesis 8.22. Day 4 institutionalizes that promise in the very mechanics of the cosmos. It's God's fatherly faithfulness ensuring order, guarding against chaos, and the kind of anxiety that plagued pagan cultures who thought the gods were capricious.
So the regular ticking of the cosmic clock is a sign of God's steady hand.
Precisely. It's not blind mechanism, it's governed faithfulness.
This distinction between how God worked on day 1 versus day 4 seems important too. You mentioned the theology of means.
Yes, this is central to a reformed understanding of providence, which you find clearly in Westminster Confession, chapter 5. Look at the contrast.
Day 1, God says, "Let there be light," and boom, there's light. No instrument mentioned, just the power of his word.
Right. God acting directly without means. That establishes his absolute power and freedom. He doesn't need instruments.
But then day 4, he makes instruments the light bearers, the mashut, to govern the light and dark.
Exactly. He chooses to work through means, through created instruments. Day 1 shows the first cause, God's ultimate power. Day 4 shows his wisdom in using secondary causes, the sun, the moon, the laws of physics he established to administer his world.
So the sun and moon are secondary causes.
That's the language the confession uses. God ordinarily works through these established means, these secondary causes, to uphold and govern creation. But, and this is crucial, these means aren't independent or autonomous. They don't run themselves.
They're still completely dependent on God's moment-by-moment upholding.
Absolutely. WCFV says God makes use of means, but he's also free to work without, above, and against them at his pleasure. He's not bound by the means he created, but his ordinary way of working, his usual providence, is through these means. Day 4 establishes this pattern for the cosmos. God appoints instruments to carry out his purposes. Even the massive sun is just a tool in his hand, directed toward his ends.
Okay, if day 4 sets up this cosmic mandate for time, including sacred time, the mō how does this connect forward to our life and worship, especially thinking through our confessional standards?
The line is pretty direct. That creational foundation for mō flows right into the understanding of worship and the Sabbath laid out in, for example, Westminster Confession chapter 21 of religious worship and the Sabbath day.
How so?
Because the Sabbath command itself, the fourth commandment in Exodus 20, explicitly grounds itself in the 6 days of creation and God's rest on the seventh. The rhythm of work and holy rest is presented as a creation ordinance.
So the calendar God built into the cosmos is meant to teach us how to live in time, not just as efficient workers, but as covenant people marked by holiness.
Exactly. Time isn't just neutral stuff to be filled or exploited. It's structured by God for cycles of work and worship, activity and rest. It's meant to be sanctified.
And this pattern continues into the new covenant, right? It doesn't just disappear.
No, it matures. The creational logic finds its new covenant expression in the Lord's Day, the first day of the week. We see the early church gathering on that day, Acts 20.7. John calls it the Lord's Day in Revelation 1.10.
Why the first day, not the seventh?
Because Christ rose on the first day,
Right.
inaugurating the new creation. So the church's weekly focal point, its moad, shifts to celebrate the resurrection, the dawning of God's new work. The principle of dedicating a specific time to the Lord, rooted in creation, continues, but it's now centered on Christ's victory.
So observing the Lord's Day is fulfilling that creational mandate for sacred time in light of Christ.
Yes, it embodies that same logic. Ordered work finds its goal and refreshment in ordered worship and rest, all under Christ's lordship. It's the weekly moad of the New Covenant people.
This has real practical implications, then, for how we handle our time day to day.
Absolutely. If God appointed days and years with this structure and purpose, then we have a responsibility. Psalm 90 verse 12 says we should ask God to teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom.
Numbering our days. That sounds like being intentional, mindful of how we use the time God gives us. Like Paul says in Ephesians, making the best use of the time.
It requires conscious effort, doesn't it? Especially today. The ethical application means structuring our week deliberately, and the starting point, the anchor for a Christian week, should be the Lord's Day.
Structuring the week from the Lord's Day outward, that's a countercultural idea.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the default mode is the 24/7 grind, right?
Yeah.
Constant availability, blurring work and rest, driven by commerce or just distraction. If we don't intentionally set aside the Lord's Day for worship and rest, the rest of the week tends to unravel into that tyranny of busyness.
That tyranny of availability that resonates. The pressure is immense.
But day 4 gives us a different pattern. God built distinctions, day-night, work-rest, sacred common into time itself. These are gifts for our good, prevent burnout, to foster holiness. Honoring the Lord's Day pushes back against that blurring and helps us measure time for God, not just for the economy. The calendar actually becomes a tool for spiritual formation.
And we also need to keep hold of that strong anti-idolatry message from day 4.
Yes, definitely. The application today is clear. Any form of astrology looking to the stars for guidance or destiny is out. Why?
Because it's asking servants, the sun, moon, stars, for answers that only the Master God himself can give. It's trusting the creature rather than the Creator's providence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It fundamentally misunderstands their role. They are signs of God's faithfulness, not sources of personal fate.
So Christian ethics rejects both ancient superstition, like astrology, and the modern functional atheism of seeing time as just meaningless, random duration.
Correct. We're called to trust the Father, who orders our days and years, who set the lights in their courses. Trusting Him frees us from superstition on one hand, and from the crushing weight of thinking it's all meaningless on the other. It allows us to receive time as a gift, as grace.
Okay, so the lights are servants, they order time, they point to God's providence, they call us to worship. But that's not the end of the story, is it? They point beyond themselves.
No, it's not the end. Like so much in the Old Testament creation account, the lights serve as tutors, as pointers, leading us ultimately to Christ. They are temporary servants that foreshadow the true light.
Christ is the true light. That's language straight from John's Gospel.
It is, John 1, John 8. Christ is the Phus, the uncreated light. The sun and moon are created lamps, mature light bearers. That distinction is critical.
So, the sun gives us daylight, marks the seasons, but it can't give spiritual life. It can't give truth.
No. It rules the physical day, a delegated, limited rule. Only Christ, the uncreated light, overcomes spiritual darkness, gives life, and grants saving knowledge. He's the light that enlightens everyone, as John 1 says. The created lights are provisional administrators. Christ is the eternal source.
Paul makes this link explicit too, doesn't he, in 2 Corinthians 4?
He does in verse 6. It's a stunning connection. Paul says the same God who commanded light to shine out of darkness back in Genesis 1.
Is the one who is now shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ.
Yes. Paul sees day 1's light, and by implication day 4's lights, as foreshadowing the ultimate unveiling of God's glory in the person and work of Jesus. The physical light was a setup for the spiritual saving light found only in Christ.
And even the created light seemed to react to Christ's work. You mentioned the sun darkening at the crucifixion.
That's right. Luke 23 tells us the sun's light failed during the crucifixion. It functions as a cosmic sign, one of those utos signifying that the created order itself is convulsing as the light of the world is judged for sin. The servant light acknowledges the moment its creator is accomplishing redemption.
And then the resurrection happens on the first day of the week.
The Lord's Day, which then becomes the central axis for the new creation community. The first day, the day God originally said, "Let there be light," becomes the day the true light triumphs over darkness and death. The whole creation calendar is refocused around this event.
There's also a connection made to the church's role using the Greek word for these luminaries.
Yes. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, uses the word fusteres for the lights in Genesis 1. It means light bearers or luminaries.
And Paul picks up that specific word.
He does. In Philippians chapter 2, he tells believers to shine as lights fusteres in the world.
So the church is meant to function like the sun and moon.
In a typological sense, yes. Think about it. The moon has no light of its own. It reflects the sun. The church has no light of its own. We are to reflect the light of Christ.
So, like the created lights, our brightness is derivative, our task is delegated, and our purpose is God-centered to point people to Him.
Exactly. It's a picture of humble, faithful witness. We're not the source, but we have a crucial job to do in bearing His light to a dark world. The created lights provide the pattern for our own mission.
And ultimately, the service of these created lights, the sun and moon, is temporary. It's provisional.
Completely provisional. They are tutors for this age. The book of Revelation makes that clear.
Right. In the New Jerusalem.
There will be no need of sun or moon to shine upon it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. That's Revelation 21.23. And chapter 22 says there will be no night there.
So the created lights are superseded, outshone by their Creator and Redeemer. The servants retire when the King is fully present in glory.
Their job is done. The mature give way to the unmediated Phus of God and the Lamb. It completes the whole story that begins on day 4.
From created lamps ordering time and worship to the true light they point toward, and finally to a new creation where only the Lamb is the lamp. #outro.
It's a remarkable sweep of theology packed into just a few verses. Creation, providence, worship, Christology, ethics, eschatology.
Mm.
It's all there. The lights were fashioned by him, placed by him, point to him, and will one day be surpassed by his own radiance.
So wrapping up this deep dive, Genesis 1:14-19 shows us the sun, moon, and stars are not deities or random accidents, but purposeful servants. God installed them providentially to order our time, to push back against idolatry in all its forms, and ultimately to direct our attention to the true light, Jesus Christ.
That's the heart of it. The heavens display God's reliable order. But, while the heavens are perfectly ordered, our own lives, our schedules, our hearts often aren't.
That's right.
So if day 4's rhythm, this pattern of morn and adim, points us toward the stability of God's providence and calls us to structure time for holiness, here's something to think about. What concrete changes could you, listening right now, make this week? How can you ensure your personal calendar, your days, your years is measured more intentionally for worship and rest, starting with the Lord's Day, and less by just the relentless demands of work or distraction?
That's the challenge, isn't it? To actually live that out, to receive time as the gift it is, as grace, and structure our weeks under the Lordship of Christ. That's real freedom. Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking.